In this lesson, we'll learn about adding volumetric effects to your lighting in Corona. In this scene, we have this house and bunch of dead trees. We have 3 Corona lights with their shape set to circle and directionality set to 40%. I also have a very dim Corona sky in the environment. The sky model is set to Raw Fake, and the zenith and horizon colors and the intensity values have been adjusted. We can run the interactive rendering to see what exactly going on. So this is what we have. The highlight compression is set to 1.5 to get rid of those burnout areas near the lights. Now, how can we add a volumetric effect so it would look like the lights are scattering through very dense aerosols and particles? For that, we can use a Corona volume material. I'm going to stop the interactive rendering and open up the render settings. Under the Scene Environment tab down here, we can define a global volume material. Simply enable global volume and now create a new Corona volume material. And if you want to have some volumetric effect in your scene, you need to define Corona volume material as your global volume material. So let's drag it as the global volume material here. Open up the volume material, and if we run the interactive rendering right now, even though we already have assigned the volume material to our scene, but nothing has changed in the render and we can't see any volumetric effects yet. That is because the absorption distance is set to 0 centimeters and scattering color is set to black. In the absorption section, you control the color that the ray will turn into after moving through the scene for the specified distance. 0 is a special value which disables the effect, but generally speaking, lower values will produce a stronger volumetric effects compared to higher values. Also, the distance value and the color here are mutual multipliers. I'll show you in a moment what I mean by that. For now, let's set the absorption distance to 500 centimeters. You notice in the interactive rendering, the scene is getting darker, but still no volumetric effect. Now we need to specify a scattering color other than the default black. Scattering color controls the color of the volumetric scattering. So if I change the scattering color to something close to white, you notice we start to see some volumetric effects in the scene. To see the effect a bit better, let's enable the single bounce only option, and this way there wouldn't be any secondary scattering of the rays, which gives us quite a different look, which can be useful in certain circumstances when you want a more localized volumetric effect to your light sources, like creating effects such as God rays. If I lower the distance to something like 300 centimeters, we see that the white rays will get a darker gray color that is defined in the absorption color after traveling 300 centimeters. And if set to 3000 centimeters, that color change will happen after a longer distance, so we are getting a brighter scene but a less strong volumetric effect. For now, let's set it to 500 centimeters. You can change the scattering color to any color, so the scattering would happen in that color. Let's set it back to white. Then we have this directionality parameter. As I increase it, more rays will be scattered in the direction that the light is facing. And as I go to the negative values, more rays will be scattered in the opposite direction. And if it is 0, the light will be scattered evenly in all directions. Let's set directionality back to 0. Single bounce only, if put loosely, will control whether volumetric scattering will be considered in GI calculations or not. So when disabled, it will be considered, and if enabled, it won't. Emission color and distance basically makes the volumetric effect to glow, and you can change the color to whatever you want and set the distance accordingly. You can use this feature to create something like a fog effect if you wanted to. In most cases, you probably don't want a glowing effect in your volumetrics, but in case you want it, you got it. For the final render, set the absorption distance to around 2000 centimeters and directionality 2.5. I'm gonna disable single bounce only. I think 32 passes will be enough for this render, but you can just start the render and stop it when the render is clean enough. I want to make sure we have high quality denoising and set the resolution to 1200 by 900 and start the final render. I've already rendered the scene, so let me show you the final render. Here it goes. Denoising can be very helpful when working with volumetrics in Corona because it can be very noisy. So definitely use high quality denoising for your volumetric renders in Corona. So in this lesson, we learned about volumetrics in Corona. See you in the next lesson.